If you like the video, then please consider supporting Slopes Game Room on Patreon. There are plenty of video games set in the future. It almost goes as far back as gaming itself. Now for me, it doesn't get any better than Wipeout 2097. I spent an absurd amount of time with this game, as did plenty of my friends with Extreme G. But those N64 gamers also had another futuristic racer up their sleeves that constantly tackled my prodigy blasting grey beast, and that was of course FZERO X. Which, would you believe it, was my first introduction to this brilliant series. FZERO is absolutely legendary, a game series that makes the world, including myself, constantly ask the same question every single time a new Nintendo machine is released. When's a new FZERO game coming out? When's a new FZERO game coming out? When's a new FZERO game coming out? Nintendo answered our prayers with Metroid Prime and sort of did with the 2D games too, and now Nintendo, you gotta do it again. Make this complete history defunct with a nice Nintendo Switch announcement. But until that day when it inevitably doesn't happen, you can join me as we take a look at the complete history of the FZERO franchise. Well, we'll be looking at the game's development, its rejected beginnings, its surprising mascot, and of course, the games. Welcome to Slopes Game Room. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna start a heavily Nintendo themed video by saying that the best FZERO game was made by Sega. Oh, come on. It's me, of course I'm gonna say that. Feel free to let me know how wrong I am in the comments. The reason I say this is that this was the days of the incredible GameCube, probably one of my favourite Nintendo systems ever made. And I'll admit, although it is my favourite in this series, it would be nothing without what came before it. And with that, well, I think we're in fact getting a little ahead of ourselves. So, let's go back to the beginning. The Nintendo Entertainment System, aka, get ready for it, the NES. Yep. This bad boy was rather popular, don't you know, and was easily the surefire winner for the majority of the gaming world outside of Europe and Brazil, that is. Now, unlike Sega's perfect example of not being able to sit still during the 16-bit generation with failed add-on after failed add-on, the Nintendo generation before this was quite the opposite. You see, during that 8-bit era, the Mighty N was doing so bloody well with this ugly grey brick and its far sexier red and cream design that they didn't really see much of a point in upgrading it. In fact, they was advised against this exact thing after the struggling mess that was the disk system by the big wigs up top. If it's not broke, then why bother fixing it, right? Well, I suppose looking back this might seem a little stupid. I mean, what was Nintendo gonna do in all honesty? Just stay in the 8-bit generation forever? Obviously not. They would have had to eventually upgrade, but like I said, during the mid to late 80s, they simply thought, why bother? I mean, come on, even in the Genesis' early days, before the release of that blue single-eyed alien looking thing, Nintendo was still ahead of the game in North America. But in Japan, it had become quite the different story. Not because of Sega, but instead it was that other company, NEC. Yep, the PC Engine had already come out and it had done what nobody had predicted or thought was possible. it actually started to take a lead and even beat Nintendo in sales. Now, obviously, like I said, this wasn't the case in the States, and again, like I said, Nintendo's 8-bit wonder was actually beating Sega's 16-bit wonder, as well as NEC's American offering of the PC Engine, the TurboGrafx-16. But the big question was, how long was that gonna honestly last when the mighty Blue was pumping out advertisements like this? Ooh, Nintendo, it's time to buck up your ideas, sunshine, and get to work on your almighty 16-bit rival. Now, this all may just sound like I'm poking fun at Nintendo. After all, it is pretty common knowledge that I, DJ Slope, that 34-year-old nerd with too many trips to Sega under his belt, still lives in the fantasy zone land of the mid-90s, where talks of the Mega Drive versus Super Nintendo ruled the playground. But come on, let's get real here. Even though the Mega Drive is still my favourite system of all time, and although it did beat Nintendo to the market by 2 whole years, even I can admit that coming out second most definitely has its advantages.